Hi, everybody. This is Joanne Eisen with Reaching Unlimited. This is another edition this week, and I am early, as you know, and I'm very excited to be here and introduce my guest, Brian Bowles.
Yes. You almost said it the way middle school kids did. Make fun of me. You almost went there, Joanne.
I had to catch myself. And I am so excited because this is a fellow medium who understands the importance and the principles of being authentic and true and being able to be of service to help people, which we were just talking about, and what I would like to share with everybody in today's talk in our chat. So thank you so much, Brian, for being here. Could you tell people a little bit about yourself and how you got into what you do and kind of where you came from? Because it's an interesting story.
Well, actually, my initial plan was to become a cult leader with a council run by drag queens. And that just wasn't going well. I looked for a compound in Waco, Texas, and there were none available. The whole thing was frustrating me, frankly. But we all have to have dreams. All right, sorry, bad joke. No, but for real, I was working as a family therapist in grief and loss work in Denver Hospice, actually. And I was also working in the school system still. And I was trying to make sense of all the death that I'd experienced from the AIDS epidemic. It was kind of a way to make sense of how many people that I knew that had died. When I came out about being gay, it was such an interesting thing. It was, I had so many people that I knew, and some I knew well and some I didn't know well. But it was something to have our Sundays filled up with going to memorial services. And it was like a thing every Sunday. In Washington, D.C., we would go to a memorial service when I was in college. So I think that's really how, my calling in mediumship kind of began. And the quick and short of it is that I ran into a really lovely medium, and I was completely against mediumship. I thought it was all nonsense. And she said, well, you're a medium too. You should be doing this. Open up to this part of yourself. And I said, oh, that's lovely. That's a really lovely idea. And I just was totally kind of demeaning her and demeaning the whole thing. And now here I am doing this work. It's embarrassing, but so I'm sorry all of you guys have to own me at your table, but it's fun. But she proved to me in an experience I had with her that there was something very special happening when my friend who died of AIDS came through. It changed my life. Every story of my life had to be retold to myself. Every story of death had to be revisited. Every story, actually. And that's when that's when mediumship really opened up for me at that time. Yeah.
You know, you said something. Okay, so I've got 4 things to talk about. But you said every story had to be unfold. What did you mean by that? Because I've never heard it phrased that way, and I really love the way you phrase that.
Well, my grandmother, she had Alzheimer's disease, and she lived with us for a time when I was a kiddo, very short period of time before they moved her into a nursing care facility. And that's a wild story. My mom literally went to St. Louis and stole her out of a care center there because she didn't like the care there and brought her to Colorado in a Nissan Sentra, because why not? And got her to our house. And I was very close with my grandmother. So just, even though I didn't have very many experiences with her, but when she died, it was my first real experience with death, I would say. And so for me, I didn't know what that meant. And I would have nightmares and profound fear about death.
Wow.
And then came out about being gay in the middle of the AIDS crisis. And that certainly did not help my fear of death. It was like death everywhere. But I think mediumship gives us a chance to befriend death, because then we recognize death becomes more of a transition. So I had to restory all of the death that I had experienced. The way I situated that had to change. The way I carry that story had to change. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And I love how you say it. It makes you rethink death. And what we know as death on this side is not what death really is, which has been, I think, one of my biggest joys and I guess joys of understanding and doing mediumship, because you can actually, I think it's one thing, like what I also like that you said is that you were against it, right? It seems like a lot of us are. Like I had no desire to do mediumship. I had no desire to even walk into that world until one day I did. I don't know. I talk to so many people that have that same kind of experience where it's not something that they really wanted to do. And I think a part of that is based on our understanding of death and understanding of religion. And I think there's so many things that play into that kind of stigma to being a medium. The other thing I read in your book, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you because I know I got that.
That's great.
But what's triggered me with that is something else that I read in your book that I find to be true is that it builds your relationship. It's, well, two things. It builds your relationships with family members that you didn't maybe know really well or didn't know the whole story of or something like that. But it also, it's not wanting to come out. So we'll stick with that one. It's not a special gift that any one person has. That's where I was going to go. Yes. It's an ability that we're all born with, but that not all of us want to embrace.
I am so grateful you said that, Joanne. I've never heard somebody say it that way. And I've heard people touch on that a bit, but the way you say that is absolutely true for me. Because the medium to me is not some special gifted person that is venerated in any way, by the way. It's an ability, not a gift. And so that means the way we use this ability is it's up for scrutiny. It should be.
Right, yes.
And the way we walk this path, and it doesn't mean that we're good or bad, because we're all of those things, frankly. And I love when people say, well, I'm just so pious. I do mediumship only from service. I'm like, well, nobody does. We all have our egos that get in the way. We all have our stuff get in the way. I mean, that's part of the deal, isn't it?
Right.
I always feel like I open up to this ability in this life so that I could learn lessons around authority. So I could learn some of these lessons around when I've spoken with a lot of ego about this work at times. And when I've spoken with so much kind of certainty. It's interesting to be certain about something in this arena, because how can we ever pretend to be certain of anything?
Yes.
So it's just, I don't know who, maybe somebody was given some special gift to be completely certain of everything in the world of mediumship, but certainly not me, you know.
And I love that you said that, because one of the things, I tend to be a very strong personality. And when I was growing up, through all of my experiences, I think one of the ways that I overcompensated was in my speaking of being overly confident in things, right? And so as I was traveling through my journey, I would be seeing something different from a different point of view, or a religion from a different point of view, or life from a different point of view. And what that led me to learn when I got into my wisdom age is that we absolutely never know anything. We know absolutely nothing to be truth or concrete. We have ideas, but I think that doing mediumship does help you to have a better understanding of the bigger picture. Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. But I think it's the bigger picture you're speaking of, Joanne, that that we're not really certain of anything.
Right.
But the way we show up in the world and the way we love one another leaves an indelible mark on the person in our sphere of influence, you know, in our life. I think about my marriage, and I think about my good friends in life. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it, when you recognize that the people that are in your life are perfectly placed there to teach you how to love. And I think we can make that really complicated, but in the readings that I've experienced over 13 years, the lessons and the message is always about the ways in which I failed at love, and the ways in which I learned about love from you. It's typically, those are the big ideas, or the ways in which my love clearly made a difference for you, and your love clearly made a difference for me. And so I think when I understand that that's the limitation of my work, that I won't pretend to be wise about everything beyond that, because I don't know everything about the afterlife. Right. And some people speak about this Greek building with columns and things, and I'm not making them wrong, by the way, but for me, whenever I explore past lives and things like that, I'm always in the forest. So it's always my joke that I'm like in the hippie part of heaven, like we're just running around and I don't know, like, you know, in sundresses. I don't know. It's my fantasy. But so there's no Greek like things anywhere. at all. So, but for me, what I love about that is that we're all going to have our own personal connection to the divine and to what this means for us. And nobody gets to have any authority over that for us.
And I want to come back to that because that's a really good point and something that I struggle with. And a part of that's judgment, right? We judge each other against ourselves, you know, in the mediumship world. But Marsha has a really good statement because it goes into line of what we're talking about is being made felt less than or not as good as because we come from a different, you know, whatever that brought us into this world. And so, or into this, you know, mediumship way of life, whatever I'll say. Take a breath. Okay, so what she said is, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. This is great.
I want to ask you all of my questions at one time, and my brain is continuing to go on diverse directions. Hi, Colleen. Colleen is watching. But what she asked is that some people say that they develop their gifts after a traumatic event, and I do. I hear people say that a lot. What would you say to somebody, especially because it almost is like it's saying that was my golden door, right? That was my ticket to this perfection or this amazing thing that makes me better than everybody else, which you and I were talking about, authority and humility, which we've just naturally gone onto those two topics. But that's what it's like. It's like saying I'm better than you because I had this traumatic event and this opened up my abilities, a special gift that only I have.
Yes. I really love the question, but you know, what I have to honor, and it's not true for every medium. So again, this is where I can't communicate for everybody who's called into this work or who does this work. I think it's a really interesting thing that the ways in which we were hurt the most become almost the strings of the instrument for our work as mediums.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that the parent that hurt us the most often becomes the teacher for us about how to do this work well. I find that so fascinating. It's a different way of holding the word forgiveness. It's almost a way of completing with the hurt. It's like where the hurt in life has profound meaning. Because the ways in which we were hurt actually give us, I've always felt this, that the spirit that will choose to sit with me and tell their story, they can tell their story through me because of the ways in which I've been hurt or the ways in which I've caused hurt or the ways in which my lessons have shown up. And there's that sense of alignment with that spirit often becomes the foundation for why the spirit would choose me to begin with. And so, but again, I don't think it's the only way. I've heard of some people that, you know, I have friends of mine that talk about how they were, you know, they came out of the womb and they were mediums. And I don't fully relate to that experience, but I really honor that we're all different, aren't we? But I do really honor that grief and trauma are, you know, in hospice, we would say, a quote by Alan Wolfelt, one of the chaplains would say to me a lot, he would say, our grief never tells us what's wrong with us. It only reveals what's right with us. It tells us that we love. And I think of mediumship that way. The ways in which we've been hurt or the ways in which we grieve become the very essence of our gift, or the essence of what we have to offer. So, did I ramble a little bit on that one?
No, you didn't. I think your answer was absolutely perfect because it really spoke to that we're all going to get to where we need to go in different directions and through different channels and, you know, whatever affects us. And it actually is a very personal thing to our journey in our life instead. And it goes back to that, you know, nobody is better than anybody else in how they get to where they're going. It's just, we all take different paths and we all have different influences and different things that affect our life.
Yes. And that's also the gift that you bring to it. Because I've always thought about mediums. That's why the competitive aspect of our work is so goofy to me, because I've always felt that it's like a fingerprint, isn't it?
It is.
There's a way in which you can do the work in mediumship that there's aspects of how you do your work that I would never be able to replicate, nor should I pretend to.
Right.
Because that's the uniqueness of who you are coming into the work. And I think that's why a spirit could sit with 5 different mediums, and it would likely be 5 very different readings, because the spirit can only use the instrument that the medium is offering. they can only use the vulnerability and the awareness that the medium is offering. And that's why I've always felt that the growth in our work is often too focused on the practice of the work rather than the soul of the work. You know, how do we soften the edges of our own stories, so that the father that hurt us becomes, if we can forgive the father that hurt us, that means the wounded father of another person can sit with me, and I can really honor their story because I love the father that wounded me.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of that, that if we can see our primary teachers in our family that are most challenging for us typically as our greatest teachers of how to do this work, then the more we soften to their story and the more we bring the grace and love that we demanded from them or needed from them, frankly, the more we can bring that grace to them, the more we can bring that love to them. I'm a big believer that in that process, we actually are preparing ourselves to be able to have any parent that wounded us, have that parent be able to sit with us for another person and honor their story. Yeah.
You know, I love what you said, because just from my own personal experience, one of my parents that I did not have a real fondness for while he was in this life, now have a very close fondness for, because he's been a really big cheerleader and helper in my development and my growth. And also in doing that shows me that what we really are here as a human being is not who we really are in truth. And if we can understand that and believe that and remember that, then it helps, I think, the bite sometimes from the pains that we go through, because I know nobody likes to hear that we chose what we are experiencing, but we chose what we are experiencing, but we're more than that experience. So I love that you said that, because I personally have definitely experienced that. And the other interesting thing, and just, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to, I actually spoke to my mother about it because it was my father who had passed.
Yeah.
And to this day, she's very angry that I even talked to my father on the other side.
Isn't that great? I do love that. The resentment carries for it with your mom. That's so cute.
It's very funny.
It's hilarious. It's actually really, but the requirements of loyalty that our parent can sometimes create with us for their pain. No, you need to be loyal to my pain. It's like, well, I can still be loyal to your pain and still love Dad.
Well, that was something that we went through. My brothers and I went through upon them divorcing, and, you know, all the drama that happened through that was taking sides. And that's never something you should put kids in, to take sides, because they're both your parents. Now, mind you, in our situation, there's three of us. Not one of us really cared for my dad that much when he was here. But, you know, we still had that connection to him as our parent, and we still loved him. So you always have that conflict. So yes, never put your kids in the middle, even on death.
That's right. And actually a lot of, it was so shocking to me, Joanne, when I worked in hospice. It was amazing. It makes sense, doesn't it? But it didn't really to me when I started in the work, but how the death of a parent would often bring the wounds of the family to the surface in really profound ways. And it could sometimes destroy relationships, and people would be arguing about the will, but the will became about love. Like the will became a reflection of love, and I can't believe you're getting more love than I'm getting, or you're getting the same amount of love when I was more loving to whichever parent. So the will became literally a document about the apportionment of love. And the wounded child would need to stake their claim somehow that the money was going to fill the missing moments of touch and love with that parent. And it's not that any of these children are bad or terrible. It really, I never see it that way. It's more that the wound of the child from their history with that parent just lunges forward and is desperate to be heard.
Yes.
And so it becomes about the will, but it really isn't about the will. It never is, actually. Because when a parent dies, we also have to accept that we die. And so there's a way in which I find the drama around a death fascinating, because the needs for a sense of belonging, but also the really profound needs of trying to reclaim the love that was not offered. It can be very painful to witness, actually.
You brought up a good point, because last night I was talking to a friend of mine who we were talking exactly about this when it comes to a will and the kind of the pain that brings when somebody's left out of a will or feels like they were dissed in a will. What did you, in your experience with seeing that and watching the interaction with families, what do you think helps people to get through that and see beyond that physical action into what the truth really is on the other side?
Well, when I worked with, and I only had one opportunity to do this, but when I worked with the family around that very issue, when the mother died,
Mm-hmm.
the mother was holding the wishes of her husband to not give the same amount of money to one of the sons that had upset them in some fashion. And the details of that are escaping me. But what I worked with brothers and sisters around, and we had one of the wives involved too in that conversation. And it was just two conversations that came to see me about.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting is I said, do we feel that we're honoring your mother and father by caring for the hurt that they had with the son?
Mm-hmm.
Or can we heal this now? Can we bring an equity to that love? Or can we allow the resentment that carried forward in the family against the one son to also die? So that when we look across at one another at this table, think about what we gain by giving my 10% of my inheritance to this brother that was left out.
Mm-hmm.
I gain a brother. All of a sudden the table is fixed. Everyone has a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Because this idea that love is earned is always where we cause ourselves great trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Because love is never equitable. I know so many friends of mine in their marriages that are miserable because of this 50-50 idea.
Yes.
And I know we have to be careful that, imbalance in love and imbalance in a relationship, we have to be careful of that, especially when you have gender inequity involved. And as a gay man being with another man, we don't have gender inequity, of course. Mm-hmm. But we have to manage that, of course. We have to make sure that the responsibilities of the marriage don't fall solely on the shoulders of the woman in the relationship, which actually happens quite often.
Yeah.
But what I mean is more that idea that we're not measuring. We're so concerned with whose fault it is.
Yes.
How much love I've given. So
Mm-hmm.
I love you this well. So when's it going to come back to me?
Mm-hmm.
I found that perspective never, ever brings peace. It never gives a person any peace.
It's interesting because I love that. And it's something, I didn't even think to talk about that, but it is about love is not equity. And yet because we're physical, we're very much drawn to that, right? We have to have tit for tat, equal, or, don't diss me. And again, it's back into that ego, that competitive spirit, which also happens within the mediumship community. Yes. Where it's really sad because you think that, I have to be better than, and it still comes back to that, the value within yourself and the love that you have for yourself and being able to be of service. Because this isn't about doing something for you, doing something to make you better. Even though we are healed through the process of mediumship, it's not about our healing. It's about being of service.
I love that, Joanne. And so for me, when I think about mediumship, I always think about me. I'm an imperfect person. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to make every mistake that any other person makes. Mm-hmm. And the moment I think I'm not operating from ego and I'm fully in a mode of being of service, you can be sure I'm operating in ego and completely out of service. So because I think when we look at one another as fellow sisters and brothers in the river, that's kind of my image for it. Now, no, we're not drowning. It's a shallow river, and Gerard Butler's there, by the way, and he's lovely. He's not a medium, but I just put him in the river with me because he needs to be there. Anyway, that's beside the point. Sorry, I'm just so inappropriate. Sorry about that. No, but he's a lovely man. Anyway, so we'll just stop there. No, but for real though. But if I picture us as sisters and brothers in the river, you think about the courage it takes to say to this world that you are a medium. You think about what that means to tell your family and your friends and your loved ones in a very public manner at times that we are called to the work of mediumship. Mm-hmm. My goodness, I feel such a responsibility to love people with that kind of courage, even if they won't be able to love me back in the moment, and even if they will at some point perceive me as bad or good or whatever, because I'm a big believer that the people that love us and think we're amazing and lovely are as wrong as the people that hate us and think we're villains. We're always complicated. You know,
Yeah.
we're anybody who only sees the wonderful aspects of me has never lived with me, and they don't see what a slob I am.
Mhm.
And so there's a way in which I really believe love is that commitment to
Yeah.
carry regard for one another when
Right.
it's not easy. And
Yeah.
it's a commitment to carry the weight of the weight of the public judgment, really, frankly,
Mhm.
around the work that we do. We know it to be true, but
Mhm.
let's be honest. It took me 2.5 years to really believe and know that this wasn't make believe. It took me 2.5 years of practicing and doing this work to really know that. I was so scared to be duped again. Growing up gay in the Catholic Church, I believed in all those things that they told me,
Yes, I hear
even
you.
as they were being slowly taken away from me. And I was told I wasn't good enough to be loved by that God that they told me about since I was a child. That God doesn't love you, Brian. So I have a responsibility to ensure that I love my sisters and brothers in that way. We're not going to like everybody in this calling, but I do feel a real responsibility to love everybody in this calling.
That was so well said. And it really shows the balance of humanity, right? Because we have emotions. We're born with emotions. So we're going to have fears and angers and sadness and hurts and pains and love and extreme love. And we're going to experience those at some times, all the time together, and sometimes at one at a time. But the one thing that we forget, especially right now with what we're going through, is the humanity of each and every one of us all experience all these things together. You know, it's not like one is inept or excluded from being able to experience these. And it really shows the compassion that we need to have with each other. Because I know for all of us that, especially in this practice that we're doing, we all have our own hangups, right? The things that are going to keep us from really connecting or really, doing whatever it is that we can do. And usually that's our brain that's not just allowing to surrender. But there's so many other emotions that everybody's feeling. And that's a part of what we have to experience and allow to process. And the freedom and the kindness for each other and compassion, like the wars that happen between families or countries or states or government or whatever, it's all coming from that needing to, like what Marcia said, I feel less than. So somebody else had to give you the impression that they're better than. And we go into this war and we don't need to.
No, but I think, if we really ground this, it's an interesting thing. And I remember when my mom, with her dementia and with her different issues, she had different psychological issues throughout my whole life. And I remember when I recognized I couldn't save her. I remember coming to terms with that at the emergency room when they had a guard outside of her door. And it was another dramatic escapade, and she ended up in a nursing home after that. I remember that moment so well. And I remember for 10 years, my mother kind of, little parts of her started to dissipate. Aspects of her face, she started to look younger. She started to look younger and younger. She sometimes would not fully remember me. But I remember that journey I went on with my mother. And then I remember when she died. And I remember that moment when I was out in this, because I'm a dramatic person this way, but right after my mom passed, I took a hike, because that's what I'm always doing, is hiking. That's how I deal with any life event. And I was standing in this meadow, and it was night, and I remember when she returned to me. And that's a life-changing experience, because I was a son ready to embrace the mother, and I was ready to love the mother in a way that I didn't always know how to do when she was here. And I think that's the hope of the work we do, I think. Because I think there's a point at which mediumship shouldn't really be about the medium. Too often it is. We're evaluating the medium. Is the medium lovely, or are they terrible, whatever. According to whatever perspective you're looking through, they're probably lovely or they're probably terrible. It's up to you. So it's whatever. Although I do believe in a high standard of evidence, all that's lovely.
Yes,
that's important.
yes,
But I
exactly.
think the attention to that, in some ways, we've lost the soul of that. That's a form of evidence too. The way we hold the hearts of the people that are grieving, that come that reach out to us, the way we do that has to matter, because I'm really coming to believe that the medium, when we do this work really well, the medium kind of disappears and
Exactly.
becomes about the loved one. It becomes about the miracle. It becomes about the completion. And to me, that's actually the healing that will survive long after. My dream is that when people leave after time of working with me, that they're talking about their mother that came through, the message they needed to hear, and they forget to even talk about me. Because at the end of the day, that's actually not going to make their life better. That's actually not going to make their grief better. It really won't. If they think Brian's lovely and he can do something magical, that's not going to make their life better.
No, it's not.
So we have to, as we get sharper about this, I think there's a way in which mediumship can offer something so much more than what we've imagined.
I agree.
I believe. And I think there's a lot of really cool teachers that are kind of pushing us in that way, actually. Lynn Probert being one of them. I think Lynn Probert and Colleen is another good example. Jen Shepard's another really good example. Kim Griffin. I work with these really, I just have these amazing teammates. And Lynn is my new mentor that I've been working with. And she's so funny. She just keeps saying to me, if you stop running and racing as if there's a race that you're trying to get as much from spirit as possible in 2 minutes, if you stop being crazy, there's actually more there. So I'm like, I don't know how to not be crazy. And she's like, that's clear. That's clear. That's why you called me. So
yes, exactly.
But there's a beauty in that too. She had me pause one time, and it was so gorgeous, Joanne, because I was going on and on with my clairvoyance, and I'm just so impressed with myself. I'm like, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, yeah, you missed something really important. Go back to the white shoe. He didn't wear white shoes. And I go back to the white shoe, and all of a sudden it became the white paper, actually the white sock with the under kind of the traction underneath, and he's sitting on a metallic table, and it's in a scan room, and it's right before he's to have surgery, and it's her grandfather, and she walks in and she touches his hand, and all of a sudden, by me pausing and not having to impress her or impress everybody, a story emerged there that I completely ran over. And so I think there's a way in which the surrender of our work also changes the pace. There's a softness there. There's a peace there. There's a trust that if I stop trying to demand all this stuff from spirit so I can prove that I'm a medium, there's a softness there where spirit can fill it in with something so much more. And that takes time. I don't think any amount of lecture is going to make that happen for a person, by the way. I don't think any amount of classes are going to make that happen. It's the doing. Mediumship is always our greatest teacher. And the last thing I'll say about that, Joanne, and not to get too stuck on this topic, but I've noticed I have some friends of mine that are spending a lot of money on their marketing campaigns and different things. And I had a friend reach out to me recently about this. They had some support with doing their online media and all these different kinds of things that they're trying to focus on. And I just talked to my friend. I said, the number one thing about this is to be good at the doing and to trust the doing. The rest will follow. The marketing and all those things, they may be important. They may not. I can't put a value on that. That's not I'm not in a place to have a real wisdom about that, frankly. But I'm a big believer that by surrendering and doing this work well, you'll always have clients. Always. I really believe that deeply.
And I agree with you. One thing I was thinking while you were talking about that, which really stuck out at me, is that through our mediumship, we're still who we are. So we're learning as we go along, right? Like I have this tendency to hurry through life. And I love what you said, because one of the things that I'm learning in mediumship is not to hurry through a reading, because exactly what you described will happen. You'll miss something that's really important to somebody. And they're not going to get that information, at least through you, because you were hurrying. But what I was thinking as you were saying that as well is that not everybody that's listening to this are mediums. So all of these things that we're talking about doesn't just apply to somebody who's a medium. Yes. It also applies to everybody's everyday life, in the way that you live your life and how you connect with others through work or your friendships, your family. it really does come back to having that, I think, that understanding and open, unconditional love for other people. Not that you put yourself out there to be stomped on, but even if that happens, if you have this heart of unconditional love to people, then you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
You just can't. So I think even in life, if you're rushing through life, if you're, not paying attention to those small little things, then you miss big lessons and big opportunities and connections and things in life that can literally change your life. So I was really thinking about, this is not just, and I know a lot of my topics lately have been about mediumship, and I think it's because I'm learning so much about who I am, the beauty of what's on the other side, and doing that inner work and that communication back and forth. But every day it has some kind of implication in my daily life and my personality and my growth as a human being.
Well, I really love what you're saying, Joanne. I had a parent reach out to me whose son completed suicide. And, I've had quite a bit of suicides over the past 13 years. But I was really, really moved by this particular reading because there was that way in which the mother talked about how after the reading, she reached out to me and she said, "I feel that my son has returned to me whole. Mm-hmm. And she said, there's a part of me that only he sees. There's a part of me that I had to say goodbye to because when he died, there's a part of me as a mother that no one else in the world sees." Mm-hmm. So I sometimes, I talk to clients a lot about putting their hand on their heart and taking a breath and softening and asking their loved one to be with them. And she just talked about how she'll go to that place where she'll reconnect with her son so that she can revisit that part of herself, that part of the mother of her that needs to step forward and be seen again.
I love that. So talk to people what you're talking about and why that connection to the heart is really important, because that's a really important technique.
It's so funny, Joanne, from the moment I started in the classes, when we get ready to do the link or what have you, or even when I was doing my practice work, my hand would just go right to my heart. And I think what it did was, what it's always kind of done for me is that it gets me out of here. It softens the edges of my mind, because I think mediumship is a really interesting journey. We take these classes and our mind may be satisfied by the answers that we're getting, or maybe won't be satisfied by the answers that we're getting. But what's interesting about it is that, our mind, I've always really felt this way. Mediumship is a miracle. I mean, the work is so miraculous.
It is.
We have these incredible experiences that occur through us, not from us. We always talk about that. But I think our mind has to play catch up to those things. And so I think one thing I like to say to people that are in their journey of development is to not give the mind so much supremacy. So by putting my hand on my heart, it's kind of an acknowledgement that the mind is not always going to understand or be able to wrap around exactly what's occurring and how it's occurring. The mind actually has to catch up oftentimes. And sometimes it just won't. Sometimes the mind's going to be like, well, I have no idea what just happened. That's weird. And I'm like, I know, that's kind of weird. That's great. So there's kind of a humor and playfulness about that I really enjoy, because the mind has this demand to kind of have everything figured out. And the intelligence and how we see ourselves in school. There's a way in which the mind's always trying to rush ahead and prove to people that we're smart or wise or what have you. And mediumship is here. And I'm not saying the mind's not part of our work. I really actually believe it is. But I really believe the heart leads. And that's a really unnatural thing if you think about it. Our world really rewards the mind.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. In our world, we're not taught to trust and to be led by our heart. You're weak if you do that, or you're going to be taken advantage of, or no. But I'm curious about something you said, because I firmly agree with you that you lead from your heart. You lead from that loving place, and that will direct you in the direction to go. But you said your mind has some part of the work that we do. I know that the work that we do is an active, passive kind of energy, right? Because you don't want to control it.
Yes.
But you have to be aware of it as well. So describe what you mean by your mind does have a part in it.
I've never been asked that. I'm going to describe something I'm not sure if I can describe well. So you'll have to help me with this, Joanne.
Okay.
Fellow medium, I need your help so I can sound lovely. Whatever Joanne says.
Lovely,
okay.
No matter what you say. So I'm okay with that. What's coming from your heart and gut, share.
Well, I've always kind of felt that the mind is our reference book, kind of a reference guide. And so the more experiences we have, for example, I recognized when I was connecting with pets, I was like, I have a lovely bird here. It's a bird to me. I have no idea what kind of bird this is. It's a bird. I mean, that's as far as I could go with them. It's a lovely bird. Oh, is it a parakeet? I have no idea. It's just a lovely bird. I just that's it. That's all I had to offer. I was like, sorry you paid for this time. I'm really sorry. I'll give you your money back because it's just a bird. So there was a point where I was like, okay, my mind has to get wiser about how to describe this thing on my shoulder that's very cute and is pooping on my shoulder because I cannot describe it beyond it being a bird. Not helpful. The bird's pissed. I'm upset. Everyone's upset. I'm kidding.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But I found that watching those veterinarian shows, The Exotic Vet, by the way, Dr. K and Dr. T, I'm in love with them. Sorry, little plug for them because I think they're amazing.
Oh no.
I know, sorry, but
am I gonna get slammed? No, I don't.
Oh, but no, you'll love it. Like they treat like really exotic wild animals, like raccoons and stuff. They're just adorable. But what I love about it is it gives you a language to honor the bird on the shoulder, and then the bird becomes a parrot or an African gray, or the bird becomes complicated, a budgie, and the way the budgie would nod its head like this up against your cheek. I love that because then all of a sudden I'm honoring the experience of that animal's soul in a very different way. My mind is allowing the wisdom of that bird to speak in a more thoughtful way, and I'm no longer minimizing that to just be a bird. Because part of what we can do sometimes with animals is we can simplify that in a way that can be very dishonoring and very painful, frankly, for the person receiving the reading. Because if you've ever had a pet that changed your life and loved you in a way that you could never love them back, there's a way in which we have to find a way to honor that. And I've never been a big fan of the idea of an animal communicator because I feel as mediums we can connect with all spirits. But
I agree. Yeah.
But I do think animal communicators can teach us a great deal about how to honor the complexity. Because you can do an entire reading for an hour and 30 minutes with one animal. And I think if we get wise about that, we can honor that complexity. We can let the story of that soul be told. Because that's also a great healing, isn't it?
It absolutely
People really need to know that their loved one, their soul animal that changed their life is with them.
You answered that perfectly because one of the things, and I'm going to go back to the beginning because you said a lot in there about many different things that were really important, but the answer to that question is that spirit will use our Rolodex, our computer system. And if you don't have the knowledge of something, then it's harder for you to be able to communicate the message that's coming from that communicator. So that's why the mind, it's like doing your prep work, like, to be a authentic and loving medium, you really have to do your inner work or you're just going to keep gurgitating all your bad stuff out. You don't want to do that with somebody who's coming to you. But, I love that conversation that you're having about animal communication and the healing aspects of animals and the fact that even when they're here, they have a specific purpose, but when they're on the other side, they still are connected to us. That's something that I don't think a lot of people think about, especially when they have an animal that passed that they really cared about and really loved.
Well, I think what I've really come to believe for myself, because the most profoundly challenging experience of my life involved one of my dogs when I was a child. And I think I wrote about that, so I won't go into the details of that now, but it was very, very painful. And one of my most profound teachers and healers in my life was an 11-pound toy poodle. I'll try not to get too emotional talking about him. But Nash, and what a sweetheart of a little guy. And so I think at some point as mediums, there's a point at which we begin to recognize that we also matter.
Yeah.
And, a lot of us have health issues, because I have a health issue and I'm on steroids. That's why I look like I'm going through my second or third adolescence with all this acne. That's what steroids do for me. I think I'm adorable and I ask girls to dance, which is weird because I don't know. Yeah, anyway, I'm trying to be funny. Anyway, but when you're going through health issues, there's a way in which your health issue is such a gift in a way because it forces you to recognize that you matter in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
That the grace that you're offering, you have to include yourself in at some point.
Mm-hmm.
That the love that you're offering, you need to also include yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a way in which we have a very difficult time differentiating, I believe, between humiliation and humility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is especially true for women in our culture. The way we honor women is often through humiliation.
Mm-hmm.
Women are never allowed to be happy about anything that they've done. Women are never allowed to be honored for that.
Mm-hmm.
Women are, I remember in the Catholic Church, it was such a very direct way in which women were told that their experiences were less,
Mm-hmm.
their value was less,
Mm-hmm.
their worth was always in the shadow of another soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can imagine those wounds. Now you're opening up to your gift of mediumship or ability of mediumship as how as I really think of it, not a gift.
Mm-hmm.
But all those wounds are there.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that we can then trust the agency of our work as mediums, but do it through a door of humility, not humiliation. Because humility to me is being so in love with the world that the world can't harm you. Because you don't need anything from the world. You love the world so deeply that the world cannot harm you. That's what Nash taught me.
That's an interesting point of view. I love that. And that's something, especially in our world, ever as a human being, we always have that
Mm-hmm.
feeling. But I think today, in this time period we're in, there's so much fear and there's so much going on that could cause us to be afraid of the future, be afraid of being here. And if you have that kind of perspective, because it's really true, at the beginning we talked about, we're here in our humanness, but we are not that human, we're the soul. And that's the part that never dies. That's who we're connecting to when we do mediumship. So it makes perfect sense if you can stay in that thinking. You're beyond, right, that the pain, you're beyond all of those sufferings.
Yes. And I'm not there yet. I feel like you get brief moments of it. And then I go back to my incredibly self-centered version of me, which is fine. I mean, I think if we're honest about that, then we don't have to play pretend and be something we're not, because it's just too much work. So I feel like if we can just love each other enough to honor that we're going to be messy, we're going to make a lot of mistakes in these arenas. But there are those moments, aren't there, where we love the world so much we don't need anything in return. Yeah. And I think in mediumship, we're so lucky because we get more of those moments, I think. And we can keep building on those. And it's not, humility recognizes that we are important, that we actually do matter.
Yeah.
Humiliation is this idea that we don't.
Yes.
And that if we have any needs to be validated, that you're bad. I think that's ridiculous. We've all been so deeply wounded. Of course we need to be validated.
Right.
And we deserve to be.
Right.
I mean, it would be weird, wouldn't it, to then pretend that somehow in the service of this work that we don't matter. I can't embrace that belief system because I have a really deep commitment to the idea that it's so interesting, Joanne. I was dealing with whenever I'm dealing with a certain issue in my life that I'm up to or dealing with in my own journey, all of a sudden clients start marching through on my schedule that deal with the same issue. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn how to love myself in the next 3 weeks with all these clients that are dealing with my issue. And it's kind of irritating at first. I'm like, oh, I hate this issue. And then in 3 weeks, I'm like, oh, I have all these courageous people that are going through a similar lesson to me. I love them. And I'm like, I need to find a way to love that version of me too. I need to also find a way to love that version of me. And I think that's actually part of the miracle of our work. We get that direct intervention into our life, I believe. Do you feel that too, Joanne? Is that true for you, if I can ask?
I actually do. And I think what I was thinking as you were saying that, it's like we're so impatient. It's going back to that pushing life, right? We're so impatient that we feel like because we know something, we should know it perfectly. But yet, as you said, it's a messy journey that we go through because that's what we're here for, is to go through the messy journeys and learn. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. but it can feel like you're alone. It could feel like, you can't, or it feels like so many things and you feel like you want to give up and all these things. But it's having that unconditional love for yourself and unconditional love for those around you, even though, like you said, we're not going to do it perfectly. But it's understanding where you're going and understanding that we can have respect and honor for everybody who's going through that.
Yes.
Because it's not something that, like I was talking to my mentor earlier today, and I was saying how I get so frustrated because I get in my way. I get in my own way, and I know I can get out of my way, but for some reason I won't. And he said to me, you have to realize that you've only been doing this for this much time in your life. It's not like you're going to get to the end and be where you want to be. You can, but you're probably not going to, because it's messy. And it's having that kindness and that respect and that honor for yourself to understand that, you are going to have these people who are going to be a reflection to you and the things that you need to learn, and still be okay and loving with yourself as you're learning it. And that's one thing that I've learned through my process, because I didn't do so well at that in the beginning. And I have some really good buddies that are actually with us right now who really helped me to be able to rise above my chatter and my stories and all those things that we go through, and be able to understand that I can be imperfect and still be good at what I'm doing, or be passionate about what it is I want to do or want to learn. These are all feelings that we're going to have. So yes, I agree with you 100%.
Well, it's funny. I think we're all children in the lunchroom trying to find out the table that will have a seat for us.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer that, gosh, in mediumship, if we just always find a seat for the other developing medium, we're all going to be enriched by it.
Right.
The moment we recognize we're actually not competing,
yes,
we're adding a new wisdom and insight into the river of our experience.
Right.
So we get wiser, we get kinder, and we get better at our work, actually, just by knowing their story and just by actually being in their energy, frankly. I actually believe there's an aspect to development circles that when I think about Colleen, I watch the work that she does, and she's so humble about it, because she's like, oh, I'm just facilitating a development circle. And then like 4 weeks later, these people are completely different in their work. I mean, completely different mediums. And the interesting thing there is that I believe every medium in that development circle is making one another better.
Yes, I
we're
agree.
benefiting from their link. We're benefiting from how their soul opens. And we're giving ourselves new vulnerability because of the way that person's soul opens. I just think it's actually really, really profound. There's always a chair at the table.
There always is. There always is. And, one of the things that I've learned is we tend to beat ourselves up because as we're going through our learning and our inner work, because that's what we learned. And I think that competition in life is something that we learned. And the more that you can be aware that we're all equal and that we all matter, and there's enough for everybody here. There's enough spirits on the other side to keep everybody on the planet busy for a long period of time.
Forever, right? I mean, really, like forever and ever. Completely.
Crazy. But we think we have to compete, but it's all a matter of your perception. And so one of the things that I am aware of when I get into, like, one of the things I like to do is observe other mediums, because you learn from that. Oh yeah, I do that. Or, oh, okay, I just now got over that one or whatever it is, right? Is that we can learn from one another. But when you feel that energy of restriction or tightness, or in any situation coming on you, that's that energy of competition, that energy of less than, the energy that to make myself feel better, I have to be better than that person. That's all coming from the ego. Yes. And there's enough for everybody. So I think it's one that we're taught that through our society, but also if you can become aware of it, you can eradicate that. Well, I don't know if you can eradicate it, but you can come damn close to getting rid of it.
I'm really hopeful that what you said is really true, Joanne. But I also think partly it really adds into what you're saying. I think partly what we can offer ourselves is the recognition that I will fail someone every day. I will let someone down every day. I will not be enough for someone in every day. So if we all can acknowledge that we're all growing and getting better, because I think sometimes in the world of spirituality, There's this idea that either we pretend that we're better than we are, which I always think is a really cruel thing to do to ourselves.
Exactly.
Because we all hurt. Just because we're mediums doesn't mean we don't grieve. We're not. And actually, I don't think we would be terribly effective with people if we didn't know the journey of grief ourselves.
Exactly.
We're not saved from it because we shouldn't be. It's an honor, isn't it? Because you only grieve if you know how to love.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if we can start to, at least in my opinion, I've always been a believer that if people that choose to love me can recognize that I will let them down one day, I will fail them, I will have an epic fail at times. If they can be persistent enough to allow the better version of me to show up and to grow into that relationship, I think that's what love is.
Yes.
Love always feels like a big pause button. It's kind of like I'm loving the best part of you today and dealing with the pain in the ass part of you. I accept the pain in the ass part of you. I hope that'll change. It may not, because I think part of the competition is this idea that we carry into this work that we have to somehow be healed or better or wiser or all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's really dangerous because I think life is so much more interesting when we recognize we're just doing the best we can, aren't we?
We are.
To get better, to be kinder, to be more loving, to hold the hand of the person that we've been called to love in a better way on a daily basis. And I think if we create that environment for one another, that means that we all get to have real conversations about the ways in which I feel like I failed myself today. And then by doing that, our work completely changes. Because in spirit can tell that story through us. But if we're always protecting ourselves and pretending to be something we're not, then spirit can't really tell their story. They can only tell the varnished story.
Exactly.
It's lovely. And it's not all lovely.
No,
right?
it's not.
You read my book. That's just like a big apology. I think Letters to Youn Medium is like all the times I've learned lessons at other people's expense. It's a lovely book. It's embarrassing. But I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted it to be like Brian Archie Wise, but it just turned out to be like this book of, gosh, Brian, you're just an idiot.
No, it's not. You know, I love about that.
I'm just joking around.
I know you are, but I don't want anybody to think that's the truth. It's all about we're learning from each other. I love how you said we will fail somebody. And it's not like that's a bad thing because it's got to come back to my biggest thing is we are human as a vehicle being driven by our soul. I cannot say that.
I love that.
But
That
it's
is so
all
cool.
about that we are here to be, as you said, messy. And it's being able not only to be able to accept that we will be messy, but it's also to love ourselves because we will be that way. It's not that we're not going to be because we weren't meant to be. We weren't meant to come here and be perfect. We would still be a soul. That's what we are as a soul, not what we are as a human being. If we can remember that, and because if you think about it, right, if you do something to me, you being you, not you being a jerk, but if you're just being you, right? Okay, because we know there are jerks. But we all make mistakes. So I'm going to be a lot more forgiving to you in general, right, than you usually are to yourself. At least that's my experience. And when you have, and you're very circumspect about the people that you have around you, right, that are ones that will help lift you up and ones that will help be honest with you, that you know will. These are all important qualities that you want in your close people. But they're going to help you to have that balance. And I know that you're very blessed. I'm very blessed in my life to have people like that, that will keep me on that equilibrium of knowing that I can be forgiving and kind and loving to myself because I made a mistake. It wasn't like I did it out of vengefulness or, being mean or whatever, some days it really could be you just got up on the wrong side of the bed and you just lashed, but it's messy. It just is messy. And it's both things. It's about really still coming back in and having love for yourself when you have done something where you feel you've let somebody down. You didn't do it on purpose. You did it based on wherever you were at the time.
Yes.
So I just needed to add that.
Oh, I love it. Because, if you think about it, Joanne, when things are really hard in your life, are you going to go to the friend that knows it all and is always smart about everything and it's always the authority in everything and is always putting out to the world that they know everything? No. You will never show your underbelly to that person.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll always go to the person that told you what happened to them in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
They told you what happened to them when they were scared.
Right.
They told you what happened when they learned how to pray for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
You'll always go to that person.
Mm-hmm.
We'll only reveal our vulnerability to the people who earn that through their humility and through their vulnerability. And I don't think Spirit's any different. I really don't. I've always really felt that Spirit will be drawn to the medium that's willing and able to tell their story in a way that brings out the complexity of who they were and honors that complexity. Because there's no bad fathers and there's no bad mothers.
Right.
There's no perfect mothers. There's no perfect fathers.
Right.
I always think the parents that I chose, because I really truly believe that, were designed to fail me so I could learn to fill in the love and the grace that they were unable to offer. I've always believed that. Not always. I believe that in my old guy life. But I've also believed I should have been a drag queen, but I have no hips. So there's lots of beliefs that are completely not happening. RuPaul's Drag Race has never contacted me back. And I don't know why. I think I'm amazing. Just saying.
I think you are.
I really want to watch this dance. I mean, I think it's lovely.
So you need to
I'm on your show,
your own dance show, your own dance team. You need to create this thing you want. Come on, do this.
Yes, why not? I mean, I'm open. But I think that's part of the beauty of this life is that, like you and I, here we are having a conversation, and you're doing this lovely show, and you're doing it through the door of knowing that you don't have it all figured out, because I don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
But I do know I want to be kinder than I was this year. There are some situations this year where I look back on and I think, gosh, the best part of me did not show up in that situation. I want to be better than that next time. And I think mediumship is always reminding us of that, because when you sit with the Spirit, they're always talking about those lessons. And so you're always confronted with yourself, actually. And so if you're unwilling to look at yourself, mediumship can be a very overwhelming work, be a very overwhelming a calling, I think, actually. So.
It is, I think, on many different levels that people wouldn't even realize. It's very, very demanding. There's so many things that you have to think about. There's so many things you have to be aware of, and there's so many pitfalls that can happen with it. It's definitely not for the weak, I would say. It's been my experience. And I've had really wonderful people that I've worked with, so I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
One question I have is that, and I'm going to post that, designed to fail me somewhere. It's still sticking in my head. I love that. Your parents are designed to fail you. Anyway, all of us on this planet have the ability to be psychic, medium. All of these things are within us. Like you said, it's the one thing because I think it's a habit to say it's a gift. And a lot of people really, put a lot of emphasis on it's a gift.
Yes.
So it's an ability that we all have. Why do you think, or what's your take on why not everybody uses it or is aware of it? Why is there so many degrees of that in the world? Do you think? I just want your opinion.
No, it's a great question, Joanne. I think what's really fascinating is collectively, I think the world is starting to recognize mediumship as real. Because it's become more of an accepted discipline, and some countries actually have best practices and guidelines, and they manage it like they would a therapist or what have you. They view it in that kind of vein. So there's that. There's a collective aspect of that, but the individual aspect of that, I think mediumship is asking something really powerful from us. There's a way in which part of mediumship for me, and it may not be true for everybody, but we recognize that we're all divine. Like John Lewis said, we're all a spark of the divine. And if you think about that, that means that every single person we come across, we look for, we're always trying to find a way for the divinity in me to connect with the divinity in them. It sounds very fancy. I know it sounds like very fancy. It should be a bumper sticker, really. Kidding. But it's like kind of that idea that, God and me can connect with the God in you. And that means that if I see someone in a wheelchair who is nonverbal or can't speak in the way that we're used to speaking, but they have other ways of communicating. And there's a chapter about that in the book, actually, but because I sat with a student who taught me about a different way to say I love you. He was saying I love you to me the entire time, and I kept perceiving, I just kept perceiving that his message was something completely different than that. And he would get really crunched up and angry and frustrated at the end of our time because I was never honoring the I love you. And I think, so if we can start to see that we're all souls, we're all divine, and there's an equanimity in that. This desire to see ourselves as above or below someone can soften.
Yes.
And we can just look for the divinity in one another. And the way that connects with mediumship, I think, is that certain experiences in our life, like you've acknowledged, I believe, tune us to mediumship. If you were a child who went through trauma as I did, or went through substantial loss when you were a child, or a very significant loss experience in your life, there's a loneliness to grief until it isn't lonely. And I can't explain that to someone else, but there's I call it the river of melancholy. When you find that river of melancholy, it's not depression or sadness, it's something else. It's comforting, actually. It's almost like I feel like wrapped in this warmth of connection that's that never changes. So not to get too fancy with it, but I'll end with that. So when I think about mediumship, I think about if you've had a lot of time alone in the dark for any reason, whatever that reason may be, could be a serious health issue, by the way. I believe that invites you into an inner life. And you needed mediumship. You needed that connection to the divine to continue to be here. In that need, that's why so many of us have had thoughts of suicide or had experiences with suicide, actually. That's why that's often a common experience I found with other mediums, because we spent so much time in that sense of aloneness, or that sense of being in the dark, or that sense of hopelessness, that for us to continue forward, I think we had to find our connection to the divine. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I never really paid attention to the suicide amongst mediums. Say that 10 times. But it makes sense, because I think when you are in that awareness and the knowing, that you would feel alone and separated, and which would make you, like for me, I won't go into it, but in my work that I did this morning, I had a big aha of something that happened when I was younger. And it was like, when I could go back to that event, I realized that I really felt like I give up on living in this world. I give up on, how do you maneuver through this world when people act these ways? We could feel very despaired, it could be tough. So I never had really paid attention to that before. But one of the things that I think that is important to believe or to know is that each medium, like each person, has their own personality. And so they can deal with spirits that have their own, because they do as well have their own personality. And I love the way you talked about, when people go to different mediums and how you would word that it's really important to understand that you are drawn to somebody who actually will be able to serve and help you based on your personalities. And I thought that was really interesting with the way that you said that. It's something to really pay attention to, that not all mediums fit all people.
Yes.
If you're with somebody who makes you feel uncomfortable, there's probably a reason for that, and you should move on to another medium.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I just wanted to share that. I was like, I totally can resonate with what you're saying, and that we're all different in the way that we read. We're all different in the way that we interact with people. We're all different in the stories and the history that we have in our computer banks. So we're all going to deal with it differently.
But I also, to end with that, I think mediumship is natural.
Yes, I agree.
And I think the more the instruction makes it unnatural.
Yes, I agree.
The more the medium actually goes on a journey, they lose themselves, actually, I feel. And then they have to find themselves. I've heard that story so many times from other mediums. And so there's a sense of, if we can acknowledge that it's natural, the heart of our mediumship is vulnerability. That means that we're recognizing who we are directly connects with this work. We can't, you can't get away from you being the instrument. You are the instrument. And then if we can begin to acknowledge that, then we recognize we have to find a way to accept and love this instrument, this person, that we
Yeah.
haven't always loved. We have to get better at loving this instrument, loving this person that we are, even in all of our failures. And I don't mean in a pretend way. I don't mean like, I love myself, even though I'm, that's not that.
No,
It's actually different. It's a kind of love myself where it's, I love myself even knowing my character defects. I love myself even knowing that I could be too sensitive at times and make situations all about me. I love there's that sense that I bring love to the lesson.
Exactly.
I'm still learning, but I choose to love myself as I'm in the lesson. Because it used to be, until I'm good at this, I don't get to love myself.
Exactly.
And it doesn't work. I don't think it works for us.
Well, I don't think we ever get to that perfect. So therefore, we're never going to achieve that unless and that's like what you would do with anybody else. You love them where they're at.
Yes.
You can't change anybody else. You have to do the same thing with yourself, and you're not going to change yourself overnight. So it's I love what you said. It's a messy process.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
It's good to have each other though, because we need each other in that mess.
That's right. And we do need each other and support each other, because when one is up, the other's down, usually, I find.
Absolutely.
Well.
You're describing my closest teammate in this work, Colleen. We are always we're always there to reach to one another when we need one another. And I have other lovely teammates that I reach to and reach to me, and it's really miraculous, isn't it? Because we never compare ourselves, because that would be ridiculous.
Absolutely.
Because Gerard Butler loves me. Deal with it, Joanne. He loves me. So if we're confused about that, great way to end the interview, because he loves me.
I agree. He loves you.
Gerard Butler. I feel bad for him. Anyway.
I do want to say, the Colleen that you're talking about is Colleen Byram. She was a wonderful human being I had on a couple weeks ago. If you want to check out that live that I did with her. And she also, she's Colleen, so you can check her out. But anyway, because you mentioned her name as finally, I was like, maybe people are wondering who this Colleen is, because you and I know her. That's all that counts. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming and sharing. You guys were pretty quiet today. I didn't see a lot of questions. Only Marcia had a question, which I don't know. I enjoyed it. We got to chat. So thank you, Brian, for being here, for sharing with us.
Thanks, Joanne, for having me. It really means a lot. I'm really so blessed that we have this community of people that we can depend on when we need each other.
Exactly. I agree with you. So thank you, everybody. Have an amazing rest of the day, and have a great future. I don't know. All right. Bye.
Bye.